My name's Ed Daffarn. I'd like to say a few words on behalf of the Grenfell United Committee. We'd like to thank you very much for your continued support of the Grenfell community 3 years and 5 months after the tragic events of June the 14th, 2017. It's been a painful month since we last spoke. There have been some positives but many negatives. One of the positives is the appointment of Mr. Ali Akbal as the third panel member to the Grenfell Tower public inquiry. Our community fought very hard to get a third panel member, and it took 150,000 signatures to persuade Theresa May to appoint someone to the panel with experience of culture, marginalisation and discrimination. While we're confident that Sir Martin Moore-Bick will get to the bottom of what happened, we have less confidence that the public inquiry will understand why it happened. And I hope, and the Grenfell United Committee hopes, that in phase module 3 of the public inquiry, we will have an opportunity to expose why we were treated so badly by the TMO and RBKC. This month has been particularly painful listening to the public inquiry. We have had to suffer listening to the evidence of the Building Control Department at the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, who failed us so badly, and whose evidence revealed a culture of bullying inside the council. This is a culture that we are determined to change, along with changing the culture and the way that service is delivered to residents by RBKC, to turn them from what is without doubt one of the worst councils into the country into a council that local residents can be proud of. We've also had to suffer listening to evidence from the TMO, most particularly Peter Madison and Claire Williams, who would like you to believe that they provided a professional, caring service to their residents. I can assure you they provided nothing like that to us. They were part of a mini mafia. They worked inside a culture of non-compliance. We've had to endure hearing how crucial witnesses from the TMO failed to produce notebooks they held in their possession to the public inquiry, and how these very same notebooks were not seized by the Metropolitan Police. This calls into question the competency of the Met Police investigation, and we are absolutely determined that people are brought to justice for the crimes committed at Grenfell, and we need to have ongoing confidence in the Met's inquiry. This month we have also heard that 3 crucial witnesses from Arconic, the company that supplied the cladding that turned Grenfell Tower into a death trap, have refused to come over from France to give their evidence.
The emails that were disclosed last week are really quite shocking in how candid Arconic staff were being about both the danger of their product and the fact that it was not of the standard to which it was being advertised. And I just think when you step back and think about that, and think about the fact that it was that cladding panel which has already been identified by the inquiry as the primary reason why the flames spread so rapidly at Grenfell, you really do have to see that as an enormous revelation about why what happened.
We have a petition online at our Grenfell United Twitter feed that we would urge you to sign to try and persuade Dominic Raab and the government to put pressure on the French government to ensure that these individuals come and provide us with the answers that we are entitled to and explain their behaviour. We've also had to listen to the evidence provided to the inquiry from Kingspan and Cellutex. These corporate participants were described by our lawyers as nothing short of crooks and killers. They manipulated the tests that allowed this product to be placed on the tower, and they employed false marketing tools to sell the products and to con construction companies to commit corporate arson on our community.
Beyond Arconic, you've got these 2 insulation companies, Celotex and Kingspan. And so what you've got is 2 companies who effectively, what they're accused of is using the tests as a way to market their products as safe, rather than using the tests as a way to actually see whether or not their products are safe. And while it was mainly Celotex insulation that was actually on the tower, the sort of headline revelations last week actually surrounded Kingspan. And the reason for that was it was in 2005 when Kingspan passed a test which suggested, or was at least marketed as demonstrating, that their product was compatible for use on high-rise buildings. What we learned last week is that in 2006, so just a year later, the insulation product was changed. So the branding wasn't changed, but the chemical composition that's used to make this plastic was changed. And that made it worse in a fire. But Kingspan didn't go and get a new test, and they didn't take away the marketing from the previous test. They continued to sell it for 15 years. What happens is Kingspan get this test pass in 2005, and they effectively corner the market in terms of high-rises, because they're the only ones who've got this piece of paper that says our product apparently is suitable for use on high-rises. Celotex are a competitor, so they want to catch up. So they start trying to find a way to test their product to the same standard. In 2014, so really only just in time to get it used on Grenfell, they passed one of those tests. And some of this has already emerged, but we heard a bit more detail about it, is that the test used extra fire barriers around the areas where the temperature of the fire was being monitored. You know, lots and lots of buildings have got these products or products like them. There are so many. I mean, almost every new build project in the last 10 years or so has been making use of products like this or products like them somewhere within their building. A big 6-tower new build development built in Brentford in the mid-2000s, primarily for student housing, but also a little bit of private housing as well. That has been occupied since then. And in 2017, so the year that Grenfell happened, there was some issues discovered with the cladding on a couple of those, the 6 towers, so a couple of them had issues with the cladding. And those investigations into the cladding have then kind of sort of peeled back the layers almost of how that building's built. And they've discovered progressively more and more problems, not just with the cladding, but with the interior of the building and its structure. And they reached the point at the middle of last month where they said, we cannot guarantee the safety of the people who live in this building if there's a fire across this whole estate with almost 1,000 people in it. And so what they had to do was quite swiftly rehouse everyone who lived there. So all of these students had to be put up in Wembley. All of the leaseholders who own sort of shared ownership flats in that block had to be housed elsewhere. And you know, I mean, you do have to appreciate this is quite a big upheaval. I mean, if you imagine just waking up on a Monday morning and getting the news delivered to you that your home's unsafe, it's been unsafe for the whole time you've been living there, and sorry, but you're going to have to move to another house.
We woke up and it was a Monday morning. We'd just recovered from coronavirus and we were just sent a really abrupt email to say, just, you have to go.
It was released to the media that morning before we even got the email. As soon as we had the email, there was already press on the ground.
So I was in Block C, but Block A and B were all actual residents, adults, families, children, things like that. We'd see them wandering in and out of our area. We didn't really know if they were residents or not, but we found out later on that they were, and they were really gutted as well. They really didn't know what to do, and they were sort of wandering around aimlessly, just sort of not having any information themselves. But it's an expensive place to live in, for one. £179 a week for a student is a huge amount of money, and I couldn't even dream of earning that in the next 3 years. So yeah, big student loan that doesn't cover it. And I was angry in that respect because I thought, I put my trust in these people, I've paid them a lot of money, and they've actually taken more money than the rent that I was due to pay, and they've ran pretty much. Like, I've not heard anything since.
There was no explanation of the reason why, it just said safety concerns, so it was just a bit of a shock to the system, I think.
We were told it would be a very, very quick process, so we were anticipating about 24-hour turnaround. 24 hours turned into 3 days, which turned into 4, which then turned into 8 days in total for us that we stayed in the building after we were told it was too dangerous to live in. And it was harrowing, it was echoey, it was weird. We just sort of sat there and thought, like, any minute if something were to happen. And a few days later, a fire alarm did go off in the middle of the night. And it's a sense of fear that I don't think I could actually describe, because it was just so intense.
It was just the craziest thing, and like everyone fell behind on uni work as well then with it, because I mean, for me, I missed all of my classes for probably about 10 days.
I'm just angry after sort of hearing what has happened, and then also what they promised in the sense of how we were going to move. We would get that individual advisor to support us wholly. They were so sorry, and we thought, sort of, are you sorry, or are you just sorry you were found out? And that's a big thing for us as students. That's solidly what we believe. They're sorry because they were caught. And actually at first I think we were a little bit sympathetic in a way, because we were like, we didn't know how much they knew. We were kind of naive, and we had no information, so we just believed what we were told.
They knew that there were problems from at least December 2017. They thought, like a lot of buildings around the country, that those problems could be dealt with by having a waking watch in place. So that's security guards who are there 24 hours a day to raise the alarm if there's a fire, or by having fire alarms put in. But then as they as they prepare for the work to make those bits safe, they're also looking at other bits of the building, and they eventually discover that that block was built using a kind of innovative construction method. So the stuff's built off-site. So you rather than having a bricklayer and turning up at site and pouring cement and building the blocks up from the ground, you build each flat into a box basically, and then you bring the boxes to site and you assemble them using cranes. So it's a bit like building out of Lego or Meccano or something like that.
I mean, to my knowledge, they've been working on removing the cladding for a while. They've had the scaffolding in place to support it structurally for a while, and I think surely this should have come to light before now. Like I said, I know people who lived there last year, and there's people in my flat currently who have lived there for the past 2 years, and to know that there have been people living in a building that someone might have known was as unsafe as it was is just disgusting, I think. And I don't think that can lie with anyone else other than Notting Hill. I think there's no one else can really assume that responsibility.
I think we're being used, wholly we're being used. A lot of money. And these companies know we get a maintenance loan. They're seeing us as cash cows. They're seeing us as having all this money to use, and then just not fulfilling what an ordinary landlord would do. A landlord with actual residents who are adults, working adults with families. Students do seem to be treated entirely differently.
We got quite a bit of financial compensation, but I think that is primarily from the university. So we got money for a travel card and food compensation for any food that we had to throw out and stuff like that. We have been provided with 2 weeks free rent. We're still to get that, but we've been told that that will be put into our accounts at some stage over the year. So financially there is that compensation, but the actual level of organisation was quite poor, and I think that left everyone with a lot of uncertainty. To know that there are buildings like the one we were in and like Grenfell where that situation could happen again and again and again, there needs to be something more done, and whether that's the responsibility of the government and regulations at that level, or whether it is the responsibility of the actual owners of the buildings, I can't really say, but something needs to be done, because what happened at Grenfell was a tragedy, and to think that it could have happened to students like us in a building like that, or anyone in any of those buildings really, it's just something that doesn't need to be repeated. So something has to be done.
We're very concerned at the lack of progress implementing the phase 1 public inquiry findings, and in particular findings around providing disabled members of the community with escape plans from high-rise buildings, and how the government are currently trying to water down these very important findings. At Grenfell United, we are determined to get truth, justice and change for the crimes committed against us, and to create a lasting legacy for the 72 lives that were lost at Grenfell Tower. We need to see the removal of flammable cladding from all buildings up and down the country, and we're dismayed at the attitude of the Secretary of State, Robert Jenrick. Another Grenfell fire will happen unless this cladding is removed from buildings, and the government needs to understand that, take action, remove the cladding, and worry about the consequences and who pays for it afterwards. We're also very concerned at the slow pace of change within the culture of social housing. We've been promised a paper, a social housing white paper, which we are still waiting to be delivered. And we need to ensure that when this paper does come forward, it creates a before and after culture in social housing, so that people who live in social housing are never treated the same way that we were at Grenfell, disrespected, marginalised and discriminated against. Grenfell United would like to thank you very much once again for your continued support. Unfortunately, until we're able to march again side by side, we will continue to provide these monthly updates for the Silent Walk for you. Thank you.